Get started. Welcome. So today for the second Saturday coaching session, what we'll be covering is the application essays. And in the last session, we talked about part one, which was the brainstorming piece and the general process. And today we're going to start about step two. And step two is, or part two, is really about the story, the power of storytelling and how that's important and part of the process of putting the essay together. So let's just review first a little bit to make sure that everybody's clear about what the purpose of the essay is. The college application essays are your chance to tell colleges who you are beyond the application. So the two key pieces there are, the essay is supposed to be about who you are, and it's something outside the application. And it essentially can be summed up with one question, which is, so tell me a little bit about yourself. And we talked last time about the process that we're going to go through. And the process looks like this. So the first piece was find your voice. It's really important that the essay sounds like you, because you're trying to communicate who you are to colleges. Second, we need to understand the prompt. The prompt is just a way for you to use as a framework to answer the question, but you do need to make sure that once you've picked your prompt, your essay responds to what the prompt is asking. The third step is brainstorming, and that is where we talked about you're probably going to spend a whole lot of time. This is where you come up with as many ideas about what you want to write about as possible before you head into step four, which is creating content. That's where your essay will actually be born, and we'll work on your essay until it's ready to go into step five, which is the refine step. And we will make it look nice, and we'll make sure all the grammar is correct and there aren't any spelling errors or punctuation errors. And that's really kind of the last step. It's really polishing up your essay. You'll notice that I've added in the middle the theme. We'll get to that in a minute, but that's the hub around which all of these activities revolve. So let's go back. We're using the Common Application as our example. There's going to be all kinds of others, but the Common App is a really common, hence the name. It's a really good example for us to use. So let's take a look at what the prompt actually says. I'm not going to read it to you, but I want to just draw your attention to the highlighted part. It's a reminder, what do you want the readers of your application to know about you apart from courses, grades, and test scores? So remember, they're already going to have a list of all the classes that you took in high school. They'll have all your grades up through the middle of senior year. They will have a list of your activities. They will have your test scores if you choose to submit them, and they will have your grades. So they have a good deal of information. And even beyond this, they will have your recommendations from teachers, as well as the recommendation from counselors and any other recommenders that the college allows. You will have provided them. So you may have already started to think about what it is that you want readers of your application to know. That process is ongoing because you're continuing to learn about yourself. But when you're ready, you're going to identify, a short list of things that you might want to tell colleges about you. So let's take a sample student and look at some possible ideas for a particular student. So in this case, the student has identified things about them that they think might be interesting for a college to know about them, that they're resilient, that they can make some hard decisions, that they care about the needs of others, that they work hard for the things that are important to them, they're curious about the brain and how it works, and that they love to be in the kitchen because that's where their creativity shines. So now that this student has this list, the way to get started is to pick one and use that as your starting point. Now, sometimes that can be the hard part, just picking one. And I want to give you a little bit of freedom here. It doesn't really matter which one you pick, because they're all good, because they're all you. And what might happen during this process is you'll start going down the road with one of these particular qualities. And as you're writing your content, you might uncover something else you'd rather for them to know, something that's stronger or even easier to write about. So things can change, but to get started, you kind of just pick one. And by the way, all of these are things that a college would think would be a positive quality. So in this particular situation, we're going to start with, I care about the needs of others. It's a pretty good one. So at this point now, you might be tempted to write your essay and have it be all about the many ways that you've shown how you care about others. All the places that you volunteered, et cetera. And that would be true, right? It's the things that actually are on your resume or that you've done. And it's not the wrong way to proceed, but I want to highlight that there are really two main problems with this approach. One is it doesn't answer the prompt because all of that would already be in your application. They already know you spend a lot of time volunteering, but that's all they know is where you have volunteered and that you have volunteered. So it's not a complete picture and it doesn't address what the prompt asked you. The second is it doesn't make for very interesting reading, just a laundry list of things that you've done. It's kind of boring. So I wanted you to think about, when you're thinking about what you're writing, I want you to have this in mind. These are your readers. They, during application reading season, that's what they call it, they have hundreds of essays to read every day for weeks. So don't be boring. And you think to yourself, okay, I'm not a really exciting person. How am I going to get my point across to colleges that I care about others without being boring or repetitive or whatever? Well, you're not going to tell them. You're actually going to show them. And the way that you're going to show them is with a story. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm going to let the experts at Pixar tell you about the power of story.
Hey, Pete.
Oh, hey, Val.
How's it going?
You know what? I'm having a really bad day.
What happened?
See, what Val's saying when she says, what happened is, tell me a story. And that's actually what this season of Pixar in a Box is all about. To make a movie here at Pixar takes years, but it all starts with a story. Humans have been telling stories since we could speak, probably even before. We tell stories around the campfire. We write plays. We write novels, short stories. We make movies. We take photographs, tweet to each other. The list goes on. The power of story is that it has an ability to connect with people on an emotional level. One of the things you hear all the time, this advice, is write what you know. Now, as a kid, I was like, I don't want to write about suburban Minnesota. That's boring. I want to write about explosions and monsters and car chases. Well, what that actually means is, yeah, go ahead and write about monsters and explosions and car chases, but put something into it that talks about your own life, how you feel. Do you feel scared? Do you feel alone? Something from your own life will make that story come alive and not just be a boring car chase. When I started directing Monsters Incorporated, the way I would pitch it is, it's about a monster who scares kids for a living. That's his job. He clocks in, he clocks out, he eats donuts and talks about union dues. And we thought that was a pretty funny idea. And sure enough, when I would tell it to people, they would smile. But when we told the story as a film, people started getting bored and restless. And they're like, I don't understand what this movie's about. Well, what I finally figured out was that it's actually not about a monster who scares kids. It's about a man becoming a father. And that was what was happening to me. So why write about what you know? Well, it's because probably what happened to you made you feel some particular way. And what you're trying to do really when you tell a story is to get the audience to have that same feeling. One of the big revelations for me telling stories is how much work they are, really. I always thought you just tell the story once and it would be perfect. And geniuses like Walt Disney or Miyazaki, this brilliance comes out of their head once and there it is. Well, the truth is, our stories don't always come out exactly perfectly the first time, or the second time, or the third time, or the fourth, up to the 30th time. And so you keep going again and again and again. And only after retelling the story many, many times does it really sparkle. This season of Pixar in a Box is about how we at Pixar tell our stories, in hopes that it will inspire you to tell yours.
But seriously, what happened?
Oh, Oh, so the first thing, I get to my desk, right? It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
So the key piece to this is you want to remember that college application readers are humans. They've been to high school, right? They experience some of what you've experienced. So a powerful essay will use a story to help them remember what it was like to be in your shoes. And by the way, it makes you likable, relatable, and memorable. So how do we find a story to tell? Well, generally, what I find is you have to talk it through. That stories come out of conversations and questions, and that's something that we'll do together. So we start talking. And let's go back to that sample student. Imagine that you're that student and you have worked at Ronald McDonald House helping people. A Ronald McDonald House is a place where parents go and stay while their kids are in the hospital getting treatment. So you tell me that when you started volunteering at the Ronald McDonald House, you were cleaning rooms and stocking the shelves in the pantry, and it was pretty dull. You were just kind of going through the motions. But at one point, one of the adults pulled you aside and said, "Hey, somebody didn't show up for a shift and we need some help in the kitchen. And I'd like you to help with making dinner for the residents." So this wasn't something that you'd done before, but you agreed kind of reluctantly because you're not really that experienced in the kitchen, but you found through this process that you really like cooking. But even more than that, you found that you liked it because you love talking to people. And when you were doing the stocking of the shelves, you really didn't have much interaction with the people who were staying at the Ronald McDonald House. But in the kitchen, you could actually talk to the guests, and the parents, who were generally pretty stressed and worried most of the time that you saw them at dinner, things kind of changed and everybody loosened up. So you came to this realization that you liked cooking, because you like to help people, and that cooking put you in a position to have conversations and to help in a way that really made a difference that you could see in people's faces. So that is your story. So stories will come out of questions as well as conversations. If you don't have somebody to talk it through with, you might ask yourself additional questions about the thing that you want colleges to know. So in this instance, it would be, when did you start doing volunteer work? What did you like about it? What kind of people have you worked with? What's the most gratifying thing about working at this particular place? What kind of work do you do there? Why do you do it? So then you will figure out a story that really can kick off your essay and express what you want colleges to know about you. So before you actually begin creating any content, you need a framework to work through. Make sure that what you're writing in your essay is actually responding to the prompt and is telling what you want it to tell. And this is called your theme, and it's like a roadmap. So it's where your destination is what you want colleges to know, and your story is the car that you'll drive to get there. So what is that about? Let's look at this. So a theme is the combination of two things: what happened, which is your story. And if you stopped here and you only told people what happened at the Ronald McDonald House, you might leave them saying, I'm not sure why you're telling me this story, or what's the significance of this? What's the point to this story? So the other part is equally important. Why does this story matter to you? Or what is it you want me to take away after I've read this essay? What do you want me to know about you? It's essentially your story's resolution or the destination that you're headed to. Okay, so in this particular case, what happened is somebody asked me to help out in the kitchen of the Ronald McDonald House because they were short-staffed. And I discovered cooking heals people. So why does this story matter to you? Well, I want colleges to know that I care about the needs of others. And now I look to help out in practical ways, because I've seen how powerful that can be, serving people in a very practical way. And it allows me to build relationships with people, which is something I enjoy. Okay, now we really get to the sense of who you are and what you're about. All right, one last step before we write, and that is we need to choose a prompt. And that comes last because oftentimes a number of prompts will be appropriate for the theme you've chosen. And the prompt can kind of serve as the road that we're going down. It kind of helps you identify how we're going to get to the destination. And many roads can often lead to the same place. So in this particular case, prompt number 5 might really work well. Discuss an accomplishment, an event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. And this one works because as you were brainstorming, you hadn't thought about what was behind all that volunteer work you did. But now you see that it's really about these relationships with people and getting to know them. Boom, right? New understanding. But there's another one that could work, and this is number 1. Number 1 is some students have a background, identity, or interests or talent that's so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share your story. So in this particular case, you'd say, well, I like to help people, and it's almost become an identity to me because I seek out opportunities to do this all the time, and I can't imagine not doing it. So this one fits too, but you can see how the essay might be a little different based on which of the prompts that you choose. The theme is still the same. So it's not really about the prompt so much as it's about how you respond to the prompt. All right, now we're through the brainstorming process. Let's talk about the part of where we're going to be creating content. All right, step 1. You're going to write down your theme. You literally are going to, on a piece of paper or a Google Doc, say, my theme is what happened. This is what the story is that I'm going to use. And why am I telling this story? Why am I writing this essay is the second half. Why do I say write it down? Because you need to commit to it in writing. It will always be at the top of every document to kind of remind you this is where we're headed and where we're going. You're also going to write down the prompt. Next, you're going to tell the story. So that moment at Ronald McDonald House, when this sample student was asked to start cooking, I told that story in just like 2 or 3 sentences. But as the student actually sits down to write this free write, to tell the story, I really want the student to go back in time and place themselves in that moment. I want all of the details, the timing, the feeling, what was it like to be asked? What did you actually do? What were you doing before? Every little detail goes into the telling of the story in step 2. Then you're going to check in and make sure that you're on the right track. Are all the details there? Is everything in place? Are there details that have been left out? Then we move on to step 3. That's the why does this matter to you? Does it make sense? What are you trying to say? So you're going to write the section of the essay that is, why am I telling the story? What did I learn from this? What do I want you to know about what happened after this? What decisions did I make? What lessons did I learn? What impact did I have? And essentially, once you're done with step 3 and you've answered all of those things, you have what I call a content draft. It's going to be messy. It's going to be long. It'll be disorganized and it's going to have errors. It might even have run-on sentences, but it is exactly what we're looking for. And I want you to think about this a little bit like you're in the kitchen. It's an hour before dinner and mom has said, hey, I got some ingredients in the refrigerator, but I want you to pull dinner together. And you go into the refrigerator and you start pulling stuff out of the fridge and you lay it all on the kitchen counter. And you take a look at what you have first. In essay writing, we want to get all of the details, all of the important information out on the countertop before you actually start making it an essay. And that's what I call the content essay. It's just a bunch of ingredients sitting out on the counter and they're not organized, not at all. So then we're going to be able to make smart decisions from the content draft of what stays and what goes. And that's what we talk about in the content review. We will look at what's in the content review. I'll ask you questions about what you've written. I might ask you to add more content to it. And then once we get everything together, then we move on to the refine stage. So let's talk about that for a minute. The refine stage is where you decide what is the content that's going to stay? What of the ingredients on the counter are things that are actually going to end up in your final dish? What are the key details? Is there anything that's unclear about your motivation or what you want to tell colleges? And is the essay in my voice? So this is important because it's going to bring you to what we call the structure draft. And that is where you're going to decide how this all hangs together. And that brings us to the refine stage. So now we're in step 5 of the process. And we've got really 2 drafts. You've done the content draft, which is all of the details about the story and why it matters. And now you are going to start looking at your writing like a writer. And you are going to write a new draft with structure in mind. You know the story you want to tell, you know the prompt you're responding to, you know what you're trying to communicate to colleges. Now you're going to focus on details like the format that you're writing it in. What's the flow? Well, how are you going to open this in an effective way that grabs the attention of the reader? And how are you going to draw a conclusion? Once the structure draft is finished and we've talked about it, you will then be free to write your polished draft. Your polished draft is the one where you take all of the structure draft and any changes that you've decided to make, and you work then on the details, the really fine details like spelling, grammar, punctuation, and we make it pretty. We polish it up so that it shines and it really is a wonderful essay. And that is your final draft. So let's quickly recap the process. The first step is brainstorming in this section. Figure out what you want to tell college and find a story or stories that shows that quality. Then we're going to move into creating content. Choose one story to start with. You set a theme, which is what happened and why does this matter to me? Why am I writing this? What's the point to my story? You'll pick a prompt so that you have some guardrails on as you're writing, you kind of know the framework that you're going to be working within. Then you're going to tell the story in all its glory, every detail, so that we make sure we've covered everything, and then we can pull the important things out later. Then you're going to explain why you're telling this story to the reader, and then we'll do a content review. Are all the details there? What's the story? Why am I telling it? What's the point? Is it all in there? And then we move to refine, which is the structure draft to make sure that every piece makes sense and it flows in a good direction. You've got strong opening and a strong closing. And then you have a final draft. So ultimately, you're writing 3 drafts. You're writing a content draft, you're writing a structure draft, and you're writing a final draft for polish. There will be other writing assignments in between where you might be providing additional content before you get to the structure draft, but it can come together pretty quickly. So that in a nutshell is part 2 of the essay process, and the steps from brainstorm through to create content up to refine, and also talking about the theme.